The refreshButtons utility method is called at the end of onCreate to create the rows of buttons representing existing query tag pairs that were stored in a previous execution of the app, if in fact there were any. It's also called each time we create a new search as well. Now, as you can see here, refreshButtons receives a string argument which we call new tag, and we basically use that argument to decide, is this a new query that we're creating, or are we simply loading up all of the previous queries? So if this value is null, then we're going to loop through all the previous queries and make a tag GUI for each one. And a tag GUI is just one row of buttons in our scrollable table layout. On the other hand, if new tag is not null, then we know we're creating just one new row of buttons, and we will call makeTag GUI only once for that new tag. Now here at lines 66 and 67, the first thing we do is get a string array of all the tags that are stored in our shared preferences file that Save Searches represents. So when we call getAll on the Save Searches object, it gives us a map representation of all of those key value pairs. When we then call keySet on that map, we get a set of all the keys that are in the map, and when we call toArray on that set, it creates, in this case, a string array that we then assign to our string array called tags. Now, the next thing we do at line 68 is sort that using a case-insensitive sort, and the reason we do that is when the user saves their different search queries with their tags, sometimes the user might use an uppercase or a lowercase letter, and we don't want to have to distinguish between upper and lowercase letters when we're sorting. We want them to show up in alphabetical order in the GUI regardless of case sensitivity. So we use a case insensitive sort on the tags array to sort all the different keys that have been stored into the shared preferences object. Now if new tag is not equal to null, we know that we're calling makeTag GUI, and we're going to create a new row of buttons for that tag, and we're going to specify the location in the table layout by calling the arrays class's binary search method and locating within the tags array the new tag that was added to the shared preferences file. On the other hand, if new tag is null, that's where we're building the GUI from scratch, and in that case we walk through the length of the tags array, and for every single item in that array we make a tag GUI row for that element at the specified index in the table layout. And to show you how we create the GUI for a given row of buttons, we have our private utility method makeTag, which receives as its arguments the query and the tag to create. You can see here that the string original query is being assigned a call to the shared preferences object's getString method, and what this is going to do is get the string associated with the specified tag, which is of course the corresponding search query. The second argument null says to return null if that tag is not found in the set of key value pairs. So original query is going to be the value null if this tag was not stored previously, or if it was stored previously, then original query will be the value that was previously stored. At line 90, we show you how to modify the contents of the shared preferences file. First, you create a shared preferences.editor object, and the way you do that is by calling on the shared preferences object its edit method. And as you can see when I hover over it here, it returns something of type editor, and that's what we're declaring here on line 90. So you have to create an editor to modify the contents of the shared preferences object. You then use that editor to put in a string with the corresponding tag. So the tag is the key, and the query value that was passed in as the first argument here is the value that will be placed into the key value pairs for that corresponding tag. And then when you hit apply, or when you call apply, excuse me, on the shared preferences object, it physically stores that data into the shared preferences file. Now, because this method can be called in cases where we already have buttons on the screen for the specified tag because it already existed previously, or it can be called for a new query that we've just added, we have to decide whether or not to create a row of buttons for that particular query. And the way we do that is if the original query string is null, that means that we are creating a new query. So we call refreshButtons with just that tag as an argument. And as we saw in refreshButtons, when the argument is not null, we create one new row of buttons at the appropriate location in the graphical user interface. If the original query string is not equal to null, that means that the query already existed, and if it already existed, it already had buttons on the screen. Therefore, we don't make a new row of buttons in that case. In the next video, we'll take a look at makeTag GUI and see how we actually create one row of buttons.